Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Uncommon NASA called Written at Night. So I haven't exactly been quiet in saying that there hasn't been a lot of hip-hop in 2017 that I've heard that I'm absolutely crazy about. Hell, if you saw my mid-year review, you know that the highest rap record on that list was technically dropped late around Christmas in 2016, but because the physical release came out in 2017, I'm counting it for this year instead to at least be eligible for year-end lists. And I reckon there's going to be more than one publication that will do the same. But you know what? Maybe I'm missing the part of the picture here. Because of the way that my Patreon schedule is set up, I can only get to so much, and maybe truly great rap records aren't being requested just yet, especially the more obscure ones, or I just haven't had a chance to really hear them. And from what Uncommon NASA has mentioned on Twitter to me, that might very well be the case. And the funny thing is that he's a modest enough MC to not include his own album in that accounting. But make no mistake, I was including it because I was excited for this one. A veteran New York MC and producer has been behind more critically acclaimed albums than you probably know. He landed an entry on my top 25 albums of 2015 with Halfway, and for damn good reason too. That record rules. And sure, his production might be challenging, his rapping might be thorny and dense, but once you're able to decode his more abstract concepts, you are left with a highly rewarding and really quite cerebral hip-hop album. And while I didn't quite love his collaboration with Short Fuse Autonomy Music in the same way, I was definitely really excited about Written at Night. Entirely self-produced with guest verses from Oh No, Open Mike Eagle, Billy Woods, Quelle Chris, and plenty more, this was easily one of my most anticipated hip-hop albums of 2017. So okay, what I managed to untangle on Written at Night? Well, alright, surprising absolutely nobody, this is not an easy record to talk about, but for slightly different reasons than records like Autonomy Music or Halfway or New York Telephone were, which could be kind of tricky to deconstruct thanks to weird twists in production or unstable flows or pretty dense themes. And while a lot of that is still there on Written at Night, in execution it feels kind of different. Easily some of the most strident and direct in delivery with some of NASA's most potent hooks to date on this project, but in trying to decode the album, it can feel kind of slippery and elusive as a whole. Fully formed, kind of complex, a lot of varied ideas that definitely reward a lot of repeated listens, but are abstracted enough to feel like describing these ideas will miss some of the intended nuance, especially when you want to consider the pretty damn great album as a whole. And the funny thing is that with this project, I get the feeling that Uncommon NASA knows all that and then he will play into it, as this is probably one of his best showcases as an expressive rapper and MC, which is a tad ironic considering that he then chose to bring on his largest array of guest stars yet. His flow is always a bit of an acquired taste, sure, but this is easily his most comfortable and assertive that he's ever sounded on the mic. Charismatic enough that you can get pulled in before reflecting on the fact that you might not have completely grasped the message even in his hooks. And yet, while you'd expect with such a potent, authorial voice would dominate a project like this, on 9 of the 11 songs he cedes some pretty significant time to his guest stars to further flesh out the self-contained themes and ideas that he will establish on these songs, which further intensifies the defined but kind of slippery feel of a lot of these tracks. And while I get into the production a little bit more in a second, considering how layered and complex Uncommon NASA's beats can be, it's kind of impressive how well so many of them MCs will adapt to them. Granted, when you got rappers like Quelle Chris, Oh No, and Open Mike Eagle, you expect them to do pretty well given a lot of their own production, and man, they really do well here. And Curly Castro, he's worked well with Uncommon NASA before, but Duco 1 and King Kashmere, they might actually handle the glitchy cascades of synth and scratching on small change better than NASA does. And Brzowski, he handles the echoing guitar and the bouncing organ line of Gingerbread Hag with remarkable groove. It's probably my favorite tune and hook on this album. Now granted, on the flip side, I can't say I was a huge fan of Guilty Simpson and Short Fuse's more abstract yet blunt delivery on Compass and God's Aim respectively, or of Mike Ladd's more slow verse on Black Hole. Now granted, that slow, dirty clank of percussion against the buzzing, borderline dubstep-esque warbles and drippy fragments, that could not be easy to structure bars against. And I think as the song evolves, it does connect a little bit better, but as a whole it felt kinda clunky to me, and you occasionally run into that with Uncommon NASA's production. But again, this is not easy production to rap against, albeit for kinda different reasons than on previous projects. In comparison with a project, let's say like Autonomy Music, this is more spacious and naturally melodic by design, which yes, can make for a lot catchier project, but it's certainly no less peculiar, especially if you pay attention to the vocal production and multi-tracking specifically. Now, Uncommon NASA's always tended to toy with binaural vocal arrangements. In an added step to keep the audience a little bit guessing here, he tends to place the vocals just slightly askew in your ears, emphasizing that direct bit of disorientation that had me checking my headphones damn near constantly until I realized, yeah, it was part of the point. And yet when you pair it with a relatively straightforward opening track with the smoother guitar melody playing off against those faint twinkles, or hell, even the slightly more jagged stuttering pops that dice up Speak Your Truth until the warbles of grimy synth will cut through there, it is pretty effective in drawing your ear and your attention, but throwing you slightly off guard. But even now I have to wonder if that distracts from how damn solid some of these melodies are. The scratchy, futuristic glitch and the winding words behind Extra Lives, anchored in a really great restrained hook from Barrie McLain, the eerie twinkling layers of God's aim that will drop into this murky emptiness then snap back really suddenly throws me off guard every time. The oily warps against the cymbals, bassy thrum and tooting fragments of The Patient, or the elongated flattened electronics against the rougher percussion on the title track. The mixes, they might not feel as dense or as grimy, but they're no less detailed or melodically intricate in a lot of their interplay, especially if you start to peel apart some of the layers. Now, that's not saying I was a fan of all the production. Black Hole, even apart from the bars, still feels a little bit lumbering and slow. The gritty atonal touches around Looking Back, they might fit the dark thrums of bass, but the keening synths around the hook felt a tad shrill and a little tinny to me, and as much as I liked the samples that opened up Compass, the warbling melodic pieces chopped up by the deeper drums and cymbals felt like they could have used a little bit more to flesh out the melody beyond just some odd tinkles. Now, I say all this, considering the breadth of melodies here, it is a testament to good percussion blending and a lot of engineering behind the scenes, how cohesive it all feels. But it's also hard not to see each track as its own little isolated fragment of an idea, strung together by NASA checking the time every so often along with the track list, which takes us directly to the lyrics and the themes. And again, with as many guest stars as it is, it's actually a little bit amazing how cohesive these songs feel thematically, within themselves. But the larger question is what this album is trying to say. That's a little bit tougher to parse, mostly because the record is placing its own flawed, meandering humanity in sharper relief than ever before. And while there's always been a consistent fatalistic side to a lot of Nassau's writing, here it feels even more fragmented, self-aware, and by necessity kind of confrontational. And of course he knows that. The second song, Speak Your Truth, is acutely aware of how its directness could be shown as abrasive, especially against this sort of production. And there's just the hope that once he blows past the frozen little arts of popularity to cut to something more real, that the audience will actually stick around. And that idea of constant yet measured and grounded change is consistent across the entire album, from the homeward glances on the road story of Compass to the carefully planned evolution of Extra Lives, which then placed in contrast of all the things in Open Mike Eagle's life that are not evolving, places his fear in a lot more context. Of course, Nassau's also a realist that knows that changing little habits don't actively do enough to destabilize a bad status quo, especially when there isn't that thought behind them. And Duco 1 goes even further with this great line: should we feel emboldened by small change successes or patronize that we are being pacified as a way to suppress us? And King Kashmere's cynical verse only highlights how little we have learned from so many great men along the way without those larger changes or larger consequences. But again, NASA, he understands this, and he also gets that by a necessity, a factor of embracing that sort of evolution is when you're gonna fail, when things slip out of control or skid towards imperfection, which is only human after all, and reconciling that with God's plan is a bigger question. And again, that acute awareness of mortality comes back in spades, which sure feels only more frustrating when you follow God's aim. We've got The Patient, wherein stepping outside of established boundaries, you must now see the systemic societal rot around you, where nobody wants any of the blame for it, people will ooze towards intolerance, and the rest are exploited by a relentless military-industrial complex. What, you didn't think this wasn't gonna get political? It's an Uncommon NASA project. Of course there's gonna be societal commentary. Although the interesting thing is that he himself doesn't reference modern politics as much, beyond some pointed criticism at the sensationalist and apocalyptic media on Black Hole, preferring to let that go to Curly Castro's ruthless string of knotted references, or Mike Ladd's more conspiratorial musing. Now NASA, he's aiming a little bit bit more high concept, from contemplating past versions of his life stored in objects, even as he does build what he actually does, it builds up that true mirror of himself, to hammering for a message to the audience who stuck around to reveal how desperate things actually are, especially when plenty who have never tried to build a damn thing or a living off of art will never see themselves consumed in the same way, especially given how personal some of these rhymes are. And yet, it's the final song that really holds the key to understanding this album. The title track that aims to capture that fleeting moment at the cusp of dawn where nobody is really awake to capture and observe that beauty, that musing moment where for the briefest second, clarity comes through. All those scattered musings focusing on change and evolution crystallize, with peace of mind coming in knowing that he possesses the agency to make all of those choices and then carry the consequences. And where Billy Woods sees the crash into humanity's inability to see all ends, Quelle Chris, he then transcends that conversation and sees the bigger picture of an album like this. The thoughts at night surrounding change translate into art representing that evolution. The artist is almost dazed in the aftermath of all that thinking, tied to moments that a director like Richard Linklater would brand as holy in their memorial, time worth embalming, but in a concept caught between days, not quite dawn, not quite night, not frozen in time, but kind of outside of it, you know, timeless. Okay, you know what? If all that sounded a little high concept, a little bit daunting, well, it's an Uncommon NASA project. What do you expect? And yet the funny thing is, I'd probably consider this one of his most accessible albums, especially on a melodic level with this production and especially with his better delivery. Granted, any effort to explore the lyrics, that's going to require some legwork, but you should expect that with this sort of left field hip hop. And the fact that he manages to pull together so many guest verses that feel cohesive and poignant in their own right, that speaks of volumes of his talent and his methodical ability to evolve as an artist and still bring together a cohesive project. So yeah, excellent album. It's getting a very strong 8 out of 10 from me. Huge recommendation, probably one of the best hip-hop albums you will hear this year. Again, I say this nearly every time I review Uncommon NASA, that this is not easy material to digest. Man, for this evolution, you're gonna want to be on board. Definitely check this out. You will not regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. Link to buy this is in the description below. And hey, he talks about it on the album. You want to support your artist, you want to get this record. And I got the poll up there. I'm curious where other Uncommon NASA fans sit on this record. I thought it was really, really potent. I think there's a lot to really pull out of this. And the feel of it is different. I will agree with that. But overall, I like the feel. This is some of his catchiest work yet. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my schedule so it doesn't take me this long to get to obscure hip-hop albums, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week you guys get to add records or even movies to that schedule. More details right there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.